I don't know how many years in cybersecurity. I can tell you that I'm in this field and I know it from the beginning. So he started from before me, and I'm 20 years in this cybersecurity field, and he's a friend and a colleague. He will talk about understanding the IS and PAS attack vectors. So without further ado, I do want to start with our first lecture. The first lecture we'll talk about, it will be Moshe Ferber.
Yeah, so perfect. Thank you very much, Leo, for the introduction, and pleasure to see everyone. Looking forward also to listening to Shauli and Amit presentations. So let's dive in instead of waiting. Let's first of all check that I can advance the slides. That's always a challenge. Yeah, seems to be working fine. So I guess after what Lior said, I cannot say that I'm 20 years old or 30. I've been in the information security business for a long time, over 25 years. But I'm here because of my last 15 years. About 15 years ago, I switched from the large, regular, traditional enterprises to our vibrant startup scene here in Israel. And about 15 years ago, what changed in the startups basically environment? The public cloud basically changed the way that we develop on top of public cloud infrastructure. And I was looking who are the major leaders, who are the thought leaders, where there could be conferences where I will learn more about cloud and its security. 15 years ago, it was very immature. So I found the Cloud Security Alliance. It was a very young organization at the time, but in the last 15 years, I've been helping the Cloud Security Alliance produce research, their education program. Also, the Cloud Security Alliance was helping other organizations like ASI Square and ISACA with their cloud certification. So I'm proud to say that I've been working, I think, with almost every security community about their cloud certification. And I produce a lot of research, and here is an example for the couple of research that I've been working on with the Cloud Security Alliance. Sorry, moving it further. The security guidance version 5 currently been working on. The serverless architecture, one of the first research about how to protect serverless workloads. And we recently released the Cloud Security for Startup research, basically how startups should develop their cloud security practices. And we are here to talk about our newest research, and this is the Understanding Cloud Attack Vectors. A word about this research, and basically what I'm going to do next is review the research and the different attack vectors, but let's define a couple of words first. This research is not about software as a service. Sorry, my slides are jumping, but it's okay. This research is not about software as a service, where you can see very different attack layers, very different vendors. We chose to focus on infrastructure and platform as a service, or basically we focused on AWS, Azure, GCP, Oracle Cloud, on those are the vendors. Why do we focus on them? Very different attack scenarios from software as a service. And basically we needed to explore deeper the different components in those clouds in order to gain some insights over what should be protected. And let me explain. There are multiple frameworks that are describing cloud threats or cloud risk. Let's take, for example, from the physical security terminology. Somebody can break into your house. It could result in very different risks. You could be taking your pocket money or your car keys, very low risk. He could be taking your family jewelry, a higher risk, or he could be meeting somebody in your house, and that's a very different risk. But all of those risks and different threats are basically ending up at a very certain attack vector. For instance, an open door. An open door that is basically an attack vector that has a vulnerability. It is open. So what we did is we looked into different attacks. We analyzed multiple attacks, and we tried to understand not what the risk or the threats that were implemented, but what was the attack vector. Last example on this. Let's say, for instance, you have exposed an API key or an access to your cloud environment. This could result in two different threats. Somebody could leak your AI chats, or somebody could delete your storage. Very different threats, very different risk, very different controls, but it's still the same attack vector. So our goal in this research was to map about couple of attack vectors. How do I remove this drawing? Yeah, found it. Okay. I want to say that I will focus, the shared responsibility model, the more you move from IaaS to SaaS, the more responsibility moves from the consumer to the provider. I want to say that over here, we're focusing on the attack vectors that are the responsibility of the consumer. I will not talk about the responsibility of the provider and the attack vectors that they bring. We focused on the things that you can, as cloud consumers, that you can work and affect. Basically, we mapped 8 different vectors that could be used during an attack. And what I will do next is I will work for each vector and I would describe a little bit what this vector is about. And I will present and I will basically show different attacks from the last couple of years that has been using this attack vector and what was the threat that they basically achieved from this and what was the result and what could be mitigating controls. For each slide, I will also say I will also map it for OWASP top 10. You see the green mapping on the below, and on the left you can see the different mapping to controls to Stride. Stride is Microsoft threat modeling that many people are using to identify risk and threats to their applications. Moving on, exploitable workload. Doesn't sound too unique. Exploitable workloads are relevant off cloud and on-premise or in the cloud. Let's define workload for a second. A workload is something that is basically running your applications. The most traditional and well-known workload is virtual machines in the cloud, a VM, but the cloud also brings us some new workloads like containers, serverless, Kubernetes, and all of those stuff has their own problems, unique challenges, and we will discuss them in more details later. Exploitable workload, it means that this workload is running some kind of an exploitable software. It could be coming from the supply chain, like an vulnerable NPM package that you download and you build into your images, like the example I have on the left. I'm not sure if you remember, but about a year ago, a guy from Microsoft was testing some kind of zip utility, the open source utility that is installed on any Linux machine. I don't remember the name of the package, but it's the most popular one. Bottom line, he saw that there was a fraction of a second delay in executing this utility. He basically looked deeper and he found out that somebody uploaded, basically built a backdoor into this package. He found it like a couple of hours after it's been uploaded to the GitHub repository. But if this version would spread and it would spread fast, it means that the attackers would gain backdoors to almost any Linux instances in the next couple of months. Yeah, so this is a huge attack, and it stopped only because this guy was very professional and he noticed this delay that was caused by the backdoor SSH, that was put in. Just to understand how much people are investing in uploading such malicious contents, the guy that was managing the GZD utility, the zip utility, for 2 years, they've been working on getting access to his repository. They offered him help and they created false identities and they were working hard to gain access to this environment. So yeah, the people are definitely looking at this attack vector. Another way that workloads can be vulnerable is basically you run a vulnerable software. It doesn't have to come from the NPM. It could be in the infrastructure. You could be misconfiguring your own infrastructure, your own orchestration platform, like the Kubernetes one, or you could be just running some kind of exploited vulnerable web server, like in the Altazian case. I want to say one thing about exploitable workload. The thing is, okay, so somebody exploited the workload, so what's next? Next is usually what happens is that people are accessing the metadata service. And if you're not familiar with the metadata service, it's basically a configuration service that each instance, each workload is using to gain access tokens and stuff like this. A way to manipulate the metadata service is find an SSRF vulnerability, basically make your web server a proxy and then access this metadata service. So one of the things you need to make sure, and after each slide like this, I'm going to have a slide about mitigating controls. So what I really want you to make sure is that whenever you're running a web server on top of sorry, I'm unable to move my slides for a second. Elior, can you move one until I figure out what's wrong? Yeah, for each slide, I'm going to give you mitigating controls. And as what you can, why I'm pointing you out to metadata service. Metadata service is almost not a metadata service attacks, cannot be detected through regular network logs. It cannot be detected through, VPC flow logs or CloudTrail or this kind of logins. It could mostly be, most of the chances that you can detect it is some kind of a runtime agent on top of your containers or VMs. And this is the reason. First, you want runtime on those workloads, and the second is the thing you want to break the connections before they reach your containers, like WAF, load balancers, API gateways, and other alternatives. The next one is I think I have the capability to do this now. No, still not. Another thing that we want to discuss is workload with excessive permission. So let's say your instance was hacked. Somebody accessed the metadata service. Somebody managed to gain the access tokens or everything that is required to move forward. The biggest mistake that people do at this point is give an IAM role or Kubernetes role or whatever CSP you're using and its terminology that is too wide. The biggest example that we have, Capital One, remember this hack a couple of years ago, somebody did an SSRF to a vulnerable web server, exactly like I described in the previous one. Then they managed to do access to the metadata service, pull out some tokens, pull out some permissions. And the biggest problems for Capital One was that the IAM role that was given to those instances was a very wide role that allowed basically browsing through many S3 buckets, object storage buckets, and not just one bucket. And basically, this is an attack that could be really avoided easily, but again, just a policy that was too wide. And we talk years about the least privilege alternative, the least privilege IAM functional concept. You need to implement this. Let's see if I can move to the next slide. Was it you, Lior, or was it me? Okay.
It was you, Moshe.
Okay, so basically you understand least privilege, granular IAM, prefers temporary keys like STS or IAM roles over static keys credentials. Be careful on your assume roles functions, and I will get back to assume role in a couple more minutes. Number 3, I'm moving on to our third slide. Igal, I saw your comment on the chat. Yeah, I'll have Lior have my slides, and anyway, all my slides are available at SlideShare. Just Google SlideShare Moshe Ferber, and all my slides are there. Unsecure keys, credentials, and application secrets. So one thing that is highly used in cloud versus on-premise environments is API keys or access keys or access tokens, whatever you want to call them. Basically enables automation, enables API access, authentication between different parts of your infrastructure or your application. The only problem is we usually fail to keep those keys at secure locations. The biggest mistake, people put it inside their configuration files, people put it inside the code, and then the code is being exposed. People put it inside the GitHub, and then they turn the GitHub accounts to public, and everything leaks. API keys, OAuth keys, OAuth is a specific type of key, are basically a target for all attackers. And you can see multiple examples for authorization keys that were exposed. For instance, Animal Jam was breached by somebody who managed to get into Slack account of the company, and Slack, everybody are sharing API keys because people need it. And then you get access to that. Also, same thing on OctaHack last year ago. Couple of software as a service providers were subject to hijacking of customer tokens. For instance, last year, Sisense was a target for this type of attack, which caused the American cyber, the DoD, the Department of Defense, to warn all the customers of Sisense to revoke access keys. For a SaaS company, this is really a challenge. Only a couple of months ago, Sheikh Khulud attack basically stole access keys from GitHub and then use it to propagate to other NPMs and packages and propagate further. And I'm talking about API keys and access keys, but remember, people are still doing the old kind of mistakes, like Equifax, one of the largest hacks in the financial sector in the last couple of years. In their reports to the Congress, they had to admit that they used the admin as login and password for one of their databases. So sophisticated API keys, people are still using admin for the databases. This vector covers all of those things, and you need to be on the lookout for your access keys and always look for alternatives. We usually try to avoid static keys. And of course, I'm not talking about phishing attacks and all of those where you have to have your methodology already in place. Remember that in the cloud, you have so many keys. You have SSH keys and API keys and access keys, and you have digital signature keys. On all of them needs the different notation, different policies, different mechanism for access. You need to build key maintenance policies. Moving on, sake of time, exploitable authentication authorization. On previous vector, I was discussing more on the customer side, the developer that forgets the keys inside the code, the phishing that happens to your end users. Over here, I'm talking about weak authentication authorization frameworks or a misconfiguration of the authentication scheme, not the end user mistake, not the developer mistake, but the admins of the identity provider or the authentication system mistake. Okay. For instance, you can see the new TMT cryptojacking malware. It was basically Team TNT and hacking group. They specialize in exploiting Kubernetes. What they usually do, and this cryptojacking malware that is in the headline here was using an open Kubernetes API in order to basically launch crypto mining containers inside a secure environment. Again, not a problem of the authentication keys, a problem of exposing open APIs. Just 1 month ago, a couple of months ago, somebody managed to gain access to any global admin on Azure Active Directory or Entry ID with its new name. It was never used in real time. It was never used out in the wild. A security researcher found this. It was based on an old API that was used for exchange syncing in Microsoft previous versions for hybrid environment. Doesn't really matter. It's broke the entire authentication and authorization scheme in Azure AD and broke every MFA, conditional access, or any policy you put on your admins. And I've said that I will have focused mostly on user responsibilities, but I have to mention this one. This is not the user responsibility, this is the provider responsibility, but I have to mention this one because too many Azure AD attacks were around misusing APIs or misusing OAuth tokens. So that's a heads up for anybody who's using the services. Great service. Yeah, I'm not saying don't use it. I'm saying that you need to apply a lot of compensating controls on top of it. One last thing about IDP and authentication. We used to think that when you move to the cloud, you're mostly worried that somebody will take over your cloud environment and use it to hack to your on-premise. Couple of years ago, SolarWind campaign, you remember SolarWind was affected. Somebody somebody basically injected malicious code. It went to the customers. One of the attacked organization was the Ministry of Justice in the United States, the Justice Ministry in the United States. When they got access to their on-premise environment, they basically, the first thing the attackers, was try to do a golden SAML attacks on the cloud IDP. So we used to think that the cloud will compromise the on-premise, but the SolarWinds attack showed us that sometimes the on-premise is compromising the cloud, and actually the attacker goal was not the on-premise that we thought is more sensitive, but actually the cloud service. But that's a bit philosophical. Move to the next one. I'm jumping over the controls. You can use it. You can review this in your first time, but it's not specific control that you. I'm sure you know all of those controls a long time ago. Object storage. I think object storage is responsible for about 40% of cloud incidents. Object storage, very unique storage. You don't find this in on-premise environments. It is mostly used in cloud environment. Azure Blob, Google Cloud Storage, AWS S3 is all example of object storage. Object storage has a very simple permission scheme. You can only give permissions to objects that are either in your account or in AWS account. You cannot give permissions, access, or enforcement to anything else. Now, usually your users, your business partners, your customers, they don't have an AWS account. So in the connection between the application layer that needs to serve those business users and the infrastructure user, in the gap between those permission systems, this is usually where most attack happens. This is where people fail to give proper permissions, or because they don't understand what type of permission to go, they do very wide permissions, or maybe public buckets, which is like today, I think we see less public buckets because AWS and other cloud providers really changed the way that it works. But bottom line, people often misconfigure S3 or other object storage permissions, and this is result in a big security event. Examples you can see here: Verizon had 12 million customers exposed on an S3 bucket. A lot of hospital in Seattle had a misconfigured bucket exposing medical data with everything. Airport data of every pilot, and basically from IATA, from the International Organization of Transit, basically leaked all the details of all the pilots and the flight attendants and stuff like this. All of this behind lack of proper object storage technical controls. Now, all cloud provider has tons of control, detecting controls and enforcing controls and preventative and compensating controls around object storage. You simply need to choose the right mixture for those. And moving on, third-party cross environment. It is so easy to have some SaaS provider accessing your cloud environment through a different account. You give them a role, you give them an access token, and this is also where many hacks take place. For the attacker, it's easier to attack a SaaS provider and then use his platform to attack many other customers. And all you can see here are basically different types of supply chain or third-party access. A big part of third-party or cross-account access is using assume role or similar functions. Assume role in AWS, but there are similars in Azure or GCP, and this needs to be practiced really carefully. And you need to build your trust policy for who will take the IAM roles. You need to pay a lot of attention on this. What else can I say about third-party access? I'm not sure I have the time, but sometimes it's just a malicious insider. For instance, HackerOne, company that does bug bounty for customers, one of their employees simply took all the vulnerabilities discovered for a certain customer and tried to blackmail them. Moving on, sake of time, third-party controls, and we move to number 7, which is unsecured and unencrypted snapshots and backups. Snapshot is very popular in any virtualization environment. You're doing a change, the first thing you do, you snapshot it. It's a very common attack vector. What is the attack scenario? Usually, attacker gets access to the environment with lower permissions. Then he starts mounting snapshots and start looking for high-level access keys that will eventually give him elevation of privilege. This is one attack vector that I want you to look about in snapshots. Remember, backups is usually the best compensating controls for ransomware. And I have to mention here, we have the second headline about murder in Amazon cloud. One of the attacks that taught us a lot about how to build organization on top of AWS. It's the story of a company that is called Codespaces. It was totally deleted, gone after a cybersecurity attack. They basically deleted, somebody gained access to a root account. That's a different story. We'll put it aside. But once you get access to the root account, you deleted everything, backups, snapshots, production, test, and everything was deleted. The company was closed after that day. So what I'm telling you here is, first, snapshots and backup. Make sure that you protect your snapshot from attackers. Make sure that you have backups, and out-of-cloud backups as a compensating control is always a good idea. Or different region, or I don't know, it depends on the attack scenario, but you have to really think about it closely. So this is about the mitigating control, and we move through the last one, the compromised images. We built our workload based on images, and images can be vulnerable. Everybody knows that, okay? We invest a lot in detecting vulnerabilities inside our images. Sometimes our guard keepers, the guys that are supposed to keep us safe, are messing around. I give here, what I gave here is basically 3 examples of official images in official stores like AWS or Docker Hub that has malicious software inside of them. Again, failure of the image vendors in order to detect that, but this is another risk that you need to be protected from, and nobody will save you from that. And again, you cannot count, at least for now, until the market mature, you cannot really count on those cloud provider or these image providers if you're using high critical workloads. Again, I usually try to avoid saying do not trust the cloud provider, because we don't have a choice. But too many mistakes with images prove that we need double guard, specifically images. I said that I will not talk about the provider responsibility, even though I said something about Microsoft. But one word about the providers: they can also be, they are doing a lot of mistakes. And some of the controls that you need to implement is basically controls against your provider making mistake. For instance, Google and other AWS, Google and AWS had couple of times where they deleted customer data, sometimes irrecoverable, again, out of cloud backups. Provider has been assisting the different regimes around the world in access to their data. That's a whole big story. I'm not going to dive into that. That's, again, the provider responsibility that you cannot really cope with. That's up to them. And sometimes they're just failing, and then your entire infrastructure fails. And we saw this example last week with the AWS failure. There's nothing you really can do about it except from plan for multi-cloud, and that's a really big controls that you need to think about it if you're going that way. So basically, that was a recap of what we just said. Remember, the cloud has tons of preventative, detective, and corrective controls for all the vectors that we just said. My recommendation to you is simply look at your company policy for each of the attack vectors and see what the combinations of controls you are implementing on this. Thank you very much, guys. I think I'm definitely on the timetable, on the times. I will take questions throughout the sessions. I'm also here if you want, if you did it on the chat. I will get back to that later. Again, all my slides are in SlideShare, Moshe Ferber, but I will also give them to Lior to publish on the Meetup webpage, and I hope you find this useful. Moving to you, Lior.